Hello, everyone, and welcome to Registrar Corp's webinar entitled How to Handle U.S. FDA Detentions and Import Alerts. My name is Bracy Parr, Regulatory Specialist and Project Coordinator at Registrar Corp, and today's moderator. The presentation portion of the webinar will last approximately 40 minutes. We anticipate having around 20 minutes to respond to your questions at the end. If we run out of time, we are also happy to respond to your questions by email. You may submit a written question anytime during the webinar by using the Ask a Question feature in the top center of your webinar screen. A recorded copy of this presentation will be sent to all registrants. Un mensaje para nuestro público español de habla hispana. Vamos a hacer el mismo webinario la semana que viene, el 13 de este mes. El mismo webinario, pero en español. Gracias. I'd like to introduce our speaker today. Sarah Gerganis holds a Master of Science degree in chemistry from Old Dominion University in Norfolk, Virginia, and has experience in atmospheric and analytical research. Ms. Gerganis began her career with Registrar Corp in 2014, reviewing the labeling and formulation of hundreds of products for FDA compliance. She now acts as head of Registrar Corp's Import Alerts department, where she assists international companies to develop the petitions required for removal or exemption from detention under various FDA import alerts. I'd like to go ahead and begin. Sarah?
Thank you for that introduction, Bracy. And as stated, today I'm going to talk to you about FDA detentions and import alerts. So I'll start with a presentation overview. First, we'll discuss a little bit of FDA's resource management, and this will include touching base with the PREDICT system. We'll talk about import detentions and refusals and import alerts. And then we'll really get into the meat of the presentation, which is a discussion of import alerts in detail. We'll talk about how to know if you're on an import alert, how you can be removed or exempt from an import alert, and then we'll talk a little bit about Registrar Corp solutions and how we can assist you with these matters, and of course have time to answer your questions. So we'll start with FDA's resource management. FDA is only one agency of the government, yet it handles a very large amount of FDA-regulated products. So nearly 37 million entries of FDA-regulated products entered the country in the year 2016, and these occurred at over 300 possible ports of entry. As you can see from the chart on your screen, the number of FDA-regulated entries has been increasing every single year. So it's very difficult for FDA, with its limited resources, to inspect every single shipment of FDA-regulated products that comes into the country. So FDA needs to make sure that they can manage these resources in the most appropriate way. So in 2014, FDA was only able to physically inspect 1.7% of all of the food products that are entering the United States. The percentage of products that's physically examined by FDA each year is decreasing with the increase in the number of imports. So it's estimated that only 1.5% were inspected in 2015 and only 1.4% in 2016. So since FDA is only able to inspect such a small portion of the number of shipments that are coming in, FDA has developed a system that allows the agency to use the minimum amount of those limited resources to identify and detain products that are expected to be non-compliant. So one of these methods is the PREDICT system. PREDICT stands for Predictive Risk-Based Evaluation for Dynamic Import Compliance Targeting. And basically, it's an automated electronic system that's used to determine which shipments that FDA should examine or sample before allowing them to enter, and which shipments are likely to be compliant and therefore may proceed without examination. The system is designed to focus FDA's resources where they're most needed, on shipments that may be violative and potentially harmful to consumers here in the USA. How the system works is that it calculates a risk score for all entries. In this case, a higher score is worse. So the higher the risk score, that means the more likely it is for that shipment to be risky. So the calculation is based on data mining, pattern discovery, and automated searches of FDA's databases, in addition to the compliance history of the companies that are manufacturing the products and the products themselves. And all of these sources come together to determine the relative risk of that entry. Low risk and consistently compliant products are usually released more quickly and given a may proceed status, whereas higher risk shipments are prioritized for examination, sampling, or detentions. So let's talk a little bit about what an FDA import detention is. When FDA decides to detain a product, FDA will issue a notice of action to the importer of that shipment. What this notice of action is a document that's going to indicate the status of the shipment as detained. It will identify what charges are being brought against that shipment and provide a date by which the importer must respond to the detention. And will also provide the information for the compliance officer that is assigned to the case. So let's go through an example of a notice of action so you can see what we're talking about. Here you see that the notice of action will show the identifying information. It'll have the entry number, the filer, the importer of record, as well as the information about where the shipment has entered, the port of entry, and the date of arrival. Then a little bit lower, you'll see the circled status is detained. So that means that this product, which is identified as saffron, was detained on October 20th, 2017. Then you'll see a little bit more information about the logistics of the detention, such as redelivery of information and where the importer may keep that that shipment while it's detained. Move on to the next page, and you'll see the details of the detention. So this same product, the saffron, has a respond by date of November 9th, 2017. This means that however the importer chooses to respond to this detention, they will need to do so by that date, or otherwise the shipment will be automatically refused. Right below the respond by date, you'll see the charges. In this case, the saffron is charged with multiple issues of labeling. So the label on this product was not appropriate, and that's why FDA had decided to detain it. So in the importer's response, they will need to address these particular labeling charges, and that address will need to, the information that's provided, the testimony from the importer, will need to be delivered to the compliance officer, who is identified at the bottom of the page by the respond by date. So as stated, the evidence of compliance must be submitted to the FDA Compliance Officer that was identified at the bottom of the notice of action by that respond by date. What the particular evidence will be in each detention varies depending on the charges in that particular detention. It may include private laboratory reports, revisions of the labeling, manufacturing records, or various additional things such as that. And if the compliance officer reviews this evidence and determines that this evidence is satisfactory to prove that the shipment is compliant and not in violation of any of FDA's regulations, the compliance officer may release the shipment. Once the shipment is released, it can go about its originally planned release into retail sale. If the compliance officer determines that the evidence presented is not satisfactory, or if the importer chooses not to present any evidence at all within the time frame of the respond by date, then FDA will choose to refuse the shipment. If the shipment is refused, there are only two options for that shipment. It may either be destroyed under government agency supervision, or the importer may choose to re-export the product back out of the USA. When an entry is refused, this goes down in a permanent record. So FDA maintains on their website a database of all of the import refusals. You can go onto FDA's website and search for the import refusal reports, and then find all the refusals by either country or product. And here on this page, you'll see an example of this page of the website where you can choose any of the refusals and see some more details about those particular shipments. So once a refusal occurs, it cannot be undone. It's the public record that can be viewed on FDA's website. So now let's talk a little bit about import alerts. This is notice to all entry ports that certain products from specific areas or manufacturers may be violative. FDA creates these import alerts whenever FDA discovers that there's a pattern of violation that creates a reason to believe that future shipments may also be violative. The import alerts instruct the FDA Compliance Officers at the ports of entry to detain the products that are listed on the import alerts. There are approximately 250 active import alerts that are about a wide range of products, from food and cosmetics all the way through medical devices and drugs. And this is one of the main ways that FDA really manages those resources to ensure that products that are more likely to be non-compliant are the ones that are detained. So FDA will focus their attention to automatically detain these shipments. There are two main types of import alerts. These are green list import alerts and red list import alerts. Green list import alerts mean that you are subject to the alert unless you are on the green list. So a green list alert will identify a particular region or product type, and unless you are exempt by being on a green list, your product will be detained under that alert. A red list import alert means that you are only subject to the alert if you are on the red list. So in this case, the red list will include manufacturers that have shown that they have a history of noncompliance, and then they will be present on the alert and detained with every shipment. Let's first talk a little bit more about green list alerts. Green list alerts occur when there's inherently risky products from anywhere in the world. An example of this is Import Alert 1620, which is for pufferfish. If pufferfish are prepared improperly, they can release a toxin. So they can be a potentially dangerous shipment, and therefore FDA wants to detain these each time that they come into the country in order to ensure that the particular shipment is compliant. So all pufferfish shipments from anywhere in the world will be detained unless the particular manufacturer of the shipment is present on a green list, meaning that they have already proven to FDA that their products are compliant. Green list import alerts also occur when violations are common or widespread in a certain area. An example of this would be Import Alert 1607 for dried or pickled finfish from Thailand, which has been shown to have a history of filth contamination. So now, anytime there is a shipment from Thailand of dried or pickled finfish, the shipment will be detained for filth unless that particular manufacturer is listed on a green list. Same goes for vegetable protein products from China. Anyone shipping vegetable protein products from China will be detained under the import alert unless they are listed on the green list. Now, for red list import alerts, these are based on the nature of violation or the history of the company. Some examples of these include Import Alert 1604 for misbranded seafood. Manufacturers listed on this import alert have shown a history of having misbranded seafood, so they've imported into the country in the past and been stopped for a random inspection, and FDA found that these shipments included misbranded seafood. So FDA chose to put them onto the import alert. The same occurs for Import Alerts 4502 for foods containing illegal or undeclared color additives. These manufacturers have shipped products into the USA which were found to contain illegal or undeclared colors, and now the shipments are going to be detained each time because these manufacturers are listed on a red list. So I've said automatic detentions a few times throughout this presentation. So what exactly is detention without physical examination? Import alerts cause detention without physical examination. Once you are listed on an import alert, you are subject to detention without an inspector even looking at the shipment. So the shipment will come into the country, and FDA will see that the manufacturer is listed on an import alert, and then without an inspector ever opening up those boxes, the inspector will decide to detain that shipment automatically. The premise of the import alert is that it works under the premise that the products appear to be violative based on a history of violation. So FDA sees that there is a history of violation of these products, and therefore it is likely that future products that are coming in from the same manufacturer may also be violative. It's important to note that an import alert and detention without physical examination is not an automatic refusal. So once you're detained under an import alert, you will go through the same detention process that we spoke about earlier. The FDA will send a notice of action. Then the manufacturer, the importer, must present evidence to FDA that the product is not in violation. And if the compliance officer accepts this evidence, the shipment will get released from a detention. This product will repeat for all shipments as long as the import alert is in effect. So even if you are on an import alert and you've sent 20 shipments, and each time the evidence was presented to the compliance officer to show that the product was not in violation and FDA released that shipment, your 21st shipment is still going to get detained. Every single shipment is going to get detained until you are no longer present on the import alert, regardless of if you are showing each product to be compliant for each detention. Now that we've discussed import refusals and import alerts, I want to take a second to review and talk about the differences between the two. So an import refusal results from a single detention, whereas an import alert results in continuous detentions that are not automatic refusals. So you can have a refusal that occurs in a single detention. If you're on an import alert, it does not mean that you're automatically refused. It only means that you will continuously be detained each incoming shipment. An import refusal occurs when FDA inspects and detains a shipment and then determines that it is non-compliant, and that one specific non-compliant shipment is refused entry into the United States. Whereas an import alert occurs when FDA notices a pattern of non-compliance from a particular company, country, or product type, and all shipments of the products listed on the import alert will be subject to detention without physical examination upon each entry. An import refusal, once the shipment is refused, it cannot be undone. With an import alert, the products will continue to be detained until they are removed from the alert, but it is possible to be removed from an import alert. So now that we've talked about what an import alert is, let's talk a little bit about what they look like. All of the import alerts are available on FDA's website, and each alert follows the same general format. So you'll be able to, once you've looked at one, you'll be able to understand how each individual alert is formatted. First, the alert will have identifying information. Then it will provide the reason for the alert, the guidance, which is both guidance for the compliance officers working at each port of entry, as well as guidance for companies that may be present on the alert. Then it will provide a product description and the charges that are being brought against the products that are on the import alert. If it is a country-specific import alert, the countries and the products that will be affected are listed. And then finally, the last portion of the alert will be the appropriate list of facilities, which is either the red or the green list, depending on import alert. So here we'll go through an example of an import alert. In this case, we have the identifying information at the top showing that this is import alert 16124, which is for detention without physical examination of aquaculture seafood products due to unapproved drugs. The reason for the alert gives some history stating that there's been an increase in the consumption of aquaculture seafood products, and as the industry grows, there is more use of these unapproved drugs, which can be potentially harmful to the consumers of the seafood products. So the guidance states that each district should detain without physical examination the products from the firms identified in the attachment. So this is a red list alert, and so products from those companies listed on the red list will need to be detained. The guidance section also states that if people have questions about certain information, that they can contact the District of Field Science and provides a number, and also provides a number for the Division of Import Operations who will handle questions about the import alert itself. So the product description in this case is aquacultured seafood products, and the charges are due to the presence of animal drugs. And you can see at the very bottom is the list of firms that are subject to detention without physical examination under this red list alert. So the red list, as well as the green list, would be organized in alphabetical order by country. So in this case, in this excerpt, you see that Colombia comes before Egypt in alphabetical order, and then within each country, you'll see the individual company names that are also in alphabetical order. You can see on this particular alert, there are two entries for Trout Company SAS in Colombia. You will notice that each of these company names has a different address. So even though they're the same overarching company, they have two separate facilities, and both facilities are on the import alert. It is possible since import alerts are facility specific. It is possible for a larger company to have one facility that is on an import alert and another that is not. But in this case, this particular company has two facilities that are both on the import alert. So let's talk about detentions under import alerts. So as I stated previously, when you're detained without physical examination, FDA will issue a notice of action just as they would in a normal detention, except this notice of action will include that the product is detained without physical examination. It will identify the relevant import alert. And once you receive that notice of action, the process will continue just as it would for any other detained shipment. The importer will have the opportunity to present evidence of the product's compliance, and FDA will examine this evidence and then choose whether to release or refuse the shipment. So, how can you know if you are going to be subject to an import alert? It's important to note that FDA does not tell companies when they're going to be added to an import alert. FDA lists all of its import alerts on its website. You can see the link here, and you may search through the import alerts either by country, industry, by the import alert number, or by the last publication date. So in order to tell if you're on an import alert, you'll need to access the list of FDA import alerts on the FDA website and search through and see if you find your company name anywhere. Or if you wanted to see if you were subject to a green list import alert, one of the best methods would be to search by country and find your particular country and see what alerts your country are, what alerts manufacturers in your country are subject to. And one of those may be a green list alert. And so in that case, you would then know that you may need to get onto a green list in order to ship your product. So Registrar Corp has developed what we call the FDA Compliance Monitor, and this is a system to help you determine if you're on an import alert. So the system is one simple dashboard that can tell you the compliance status of your company as well as any other companies that you choose to monitor. And the dashboard will show you whether or not there is an inspection, if the company has any warning letters, as well as let you know about import refusals and whether or not you're subject to an import alert. As you can see in the example on the screen, you have this company subject to 2 import alerts and also on a green list and therefore exempt from another import alert. So it's just a really helpful way to monitor whether or not you're on an import alert. And these alerts, as soon as your status would change, you would get an email alerting you to any changes. So if you happen to find yourself subject to an import alert, how do you get removed and exempt from detention without physical examination? And the answer to that question is that you must petition FDA in order to be removed from the import alert. So a firm is going to remain subject to detention without physical examination under an import alert unless the firm provides evidence to FDA that they are no longer shipping risky products. Evidence is presented to FDA in the form of a petition that's sent to the Division of Import Operations in order to request removal from the import alert. So even if you are consistently shipping compliant products, you will still be subject to the import alert unless you petition and ask FDA to please take you off of this import alert and also provide a lot of evidence to FDA in order for FDA to determine that you are, in fact, shipping compliant products. The evidence may be up to 100 pages in length and will vary depending on what particular import alert you are on. And FDA really wants to see extensive documentation to convince the agency that you should no longer be subject to the import alert. So there are 2 main requirements that each petition must include in order to get off of an import alert. The first requirement of the petition is to include corrective actions. So this is the documentary evidence that the problem that originally caused the placement of the company onto the import alert has been corrected or prevented for. The corrective actions will vary depending on the particular alert. They may include things such as revisions to a HACCP plan, the change of suppliers for raw materials, changes to labeling or formulation, may require the manufacturers to have lab analyses done for every lot before a shipment, or any other number of changes that can correct for a compliance issue. Second main requirement of a petition would be shipments. So FDA wants to see your corrective actions, and FDA also wants you to prove that your corrective actions are working over a period of time. And this proof to FDA comes in the form of shipments. So FDA would like a series of non-violative shipments to verify that the corrective or preventative actions are sufficient. FDA requires typically a minimum of 5 to 12 routine commercial shipments spaced over a reasonable amount of time. So if you're only on the import alert for one product, a minimum of 5 shipments may be enough evidence to convince FDA that your corrective actions are sufficient over time. Whereas if you're on an import alert for multiple products, FDA may want 12 or more shipments in order to be convinced that your corrective actions are working. So the documentation that you must include for each shipment includes the U.S. Customs form, the commercial invoice, packing list, and bill of lading. And it's important to note that the shipments included in a petition must be detained and released by FDA. So these are shipments that have come in while you're on the import alert, have been detained under the import alert. You have presented evidence to FDA to prove that the products are compliant, and FDA has chosen to release that shipment. Once the shipment is detained and released, it may be included in the petition. So once you've developed and implemented all of your corrective actions and collected enough shipments to submit the petition, and the petition is submitted to FDA, FDA will then have to review the petition. Division of Import Operations is the agency that reviews the petitions, and they are reviewed in the order in which they were received. So oftentimes the review period can take several months, depending on the particular workload of the agency at that time. And it's also possible that FDA may request additional documentation or shipments during the course of the review. So FDA, for example, if you presented a HACCP plan as part of your corrective actions, FDA may request to see monitoring records for a number of different manufacturing cycles under that HACCP plan. Or if a number of your shipments occurred very close together, say you had 4 shipments come in within a time period of 3 days, FDA may consider those to be a single shipment for the purpose of the import alert petition, and therefore FDA may request that you send more shipments before they finish their review. Once FDA has completed its review, you've provided any additional information they've requested, and they've reviewed all of that information. The Division of Import Operations will decide whether to approve or deny the petition. If the evidence is sufficient and FDA chooses to approve the petition, FDA will issue an approval letter to the submitter of that petition and will also notify all FDA district offices of the change in status of that company. So once the petition is approved, the entries will no longer be subject to detention without physical examination. However, it's important to note that the shipments will remain subject to routine inspections. So this means that the shipments will go back to a normal import procedure where they may randomly be stopped for inspection, but they will not be stopped every single time under the import alert. If a petition is denied, FDA will issue a denial letter to the submitter, and this letter will include information explaining why the petition was denied. So once any deficiencies that caused the petition to be denied have been corrected, you may submit a new petition to FDA for further review. It's important to note there is not a penalty for a denied petition. So if you choose to petition FDA, FDA does not believe that your corrective actions are sufficient at this time and requests you to do more, you can make those further changes and petition again without any penalty for that action. So now that we understand what import alerts are and how to petition, let's talk a little bit about Registrar Corp services to assist you through this process. So we can assist you to prepare the petition to be removed from detention without physical examination. And what we can do is help you to identify the cause of the problem that caused your placement on the import alert to begin with. We can assist you in determining and implementing some certain types of corrective actions. This includes label reviews of your HACCP or food safety plans. We can assist with food canning establishment, filings, registrations, and color badge certifications, among other things. Our service will help to assist you with FDA communications for each detained shipment after the implementation of your corrective actions. So once your corrective actions are implemented and you're in that second phase of the petition where you're working to collect enough shipments to include in the petition, we will certainly be there to assist you in dealing with FDA through each of these detentions. And then once all of the corrective actions and shipments are completed, we'll assist you to develop the petition to be removed from the import alert and submit that petition to FDA. This includes an administrative review of all documents regarding the corrective actions and the cleared shipments. And then if FDA has further questions throughout the review period, we will be there to assist you to respond to all of FDA's questions. In addition, Registrar Corp also offers the FDA Compliance Monitor. You can monitor your company and your suppliers, and you will receive alerts whenever the company that you are monitoring has a change in status. So you will receive an alert if that company has a refusal, or if a company is added to an import alert, or even if they have a green list and they're added to that green list. So that's a great way to know whether you or any companies that you would choose to follow are being added to import alerts and to deal with it at that time. Additional services that Registrar Corp can provide include registration and U.S. agent services, prior notice filings, reviews of your label and ingredients, food safety services, including mock FDA inspections, Safety Modernization Act compliance services, and as well as assistance with individual detentions. With that, I would love to take some of your questions.
Thank you, Sarah, for that great presentation. Again, I'd like to announce that we will be sending a recorded copy of this webinar and a PDF copy of the slides to all registrants. So we're going to now open it up for questions. Again, you can submit a written question at any time during the webinar using Ask a Question feature in the top center of your webinar screen. And we've got our first question here. Could you please advise when would the import alert come into force for the company after they are on the red list? So, Sarah, when does an import alert come into become active for a company once they're on a red list?
Thank you for that question. So once you're added to a red list, your next shipment will be subject to that alert. So it's possible to be added to a red list after just one violative shipment. FDA does not always add you to an import alert after one violative shipment, but it is possible depending on the alert. And once you're added to that alert, if you have another shipment coming in the very next day, that shipment will be detained under the import alert.
Thank you, Sarah. Another question we have here is, why would I need to check the status of my suppliers before purchasing raw materials? Thank you for that question. I think I'll take this one. So, like Sarah mentioned, the FDA Compliance Monitor, it kind of performs like a credit check on your suppliers, and that's a part of two big regulations under FSMA. The Hazard Analysis and Risk-Based Preventive Controls for Human and Animal Food, which requires you to implement a supply chain program, and so you must monitor the status of your suppliers, whether they get on import alert or have an import refusal, or any other change in their status. You need to be able to respond to that. And then importers as well, you have to perform this supplier evaluation. So being able to collect all that data in one place, very convenient and is necessary under the law. So we're going to take the next question. How many shipments have to fail or have to be refused before you are placed on import alert? Sarah?
All right, I've kind of touched base on this a little bit already, but you can be added to an import alert after one failed shipment. We know that that is not always the case, as FDA will need to, the compliance officers at the port of entry will need to request that you be added to an import alert through the Division of Import Operations. So after one failed entry, they may or may not do that, but it is 100% possible to be added to an import alert after just one failed entry.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Our next question here from a listener in Canada. When you submit a petition for a detained shipment, how long does it take for FDA's review and response?
So the answer to this question is different for a detained shipment versus an import alert petition. If you are submitting a petition for an import alert, FDA tries to review your petition within about 30 days. However, it is dependent on the workload of the agency at that time, and it also dependent on whether or not FDA has more questions for you based on the evidence presented in your petition. So it is more than likely that it will take 30 days or more. In my experience, a number of petitions have been reviewed in approximately 2 to 3 months' time. As far as for an individual detained shipment, if you submit a testimony of admissibility to the compliance officer for a singular detention, that is often resolved within a few weeks. It can take longer if the compliance officer chooses to kick the information up to the overarching center for further analysis by their supervisors, in which case it can take a month or more. But typically individual detentions are resolved much more quickly than import alerts.
Thanks again, Sarah. So a question now from a listener in England. Could you be added to an alert if you use an incorrect commodity code?
Will not likely be added to an alert for using an incorrect product code. This may cause issues in the PREDICT system. This system will take note of the fact that information is being entered incorrectly about a shipment, and so if your company has a history of incorrectly entering this information, you may increase your PREDICT score and therefore be more likely to be detained, but it will not get you added to an import alert.
Thanks again, Sarah. So now a listener from Brazil. Is it possible to be included in an alert after successful shipments? So I think Hugo is asking, is it possible to be put on alert after shipments that have not been refused?
So if you are not currently on an alert and if you are having shipments that are not being refused, there is likely not a compliance problem that will cause you to be placed on an import alert. However, it is possible to get onto some import alerts through things such as a failed FDA inspection. So if you, for example, if you're a seafood manufacturer and FDA inspects your facility and determines that your HACCP plan is not appropriate, FDA may add you to that import alert regardless of whether or not your shipments have been coming into the country successfully.
Now we'll go to a listener from China. May I ask, how should the company prove the product in the petition is the one on the import alert? Do I use product name or ingredient?
So this will depend on the particular import alert. We'll use an example of, say it's a cosmetic that's on the import alert for illegal color additives. So the particular type of information you would want to include to show that the product is the same would be the labeling and the formulation. You will show this through the product code that's entered in the prior notice when the shipment comes in. It's just all of that identifying information that's shipped with your product originally. Since you're being detained under the import alert, you will have a compliance officer looking over each of your detentions, so it should be clear to the compliance officer that this is the same product, so long as it is the same product in actuality.
Thanks. So my company manufactures a product that is subject to a green list import alert. Can I be added to the green list before I begin shipping to the USA in order to avoid ever getting detained in the first place?
unfortunately, this is not possible. As we talked about the requirements for import alert petitions, they must include evidence of corrective actions and evidence of shipment of non-violative shipments. So it would be necessary for you to begin shipping, have your first few shipments detained, present evidence to the compliance officer to show that your shipment is in compliance, and which will allow the FDA compliance officer to then release your shipment. And then once you've collected 5 to 12 released shipments, then you can petition to be added to the import alert, added to the green list.
So now we go to a listener from Lebanon. Sarah, please give an example of a labeling violation that could result in getting on import alert that is something besides undeclared or illegal food additives. So are there other labeling violations that could result in an import alert?
Sure. An example of that would be a nutrition facts chart that is inappropriate or does not include the correct information. Sometimes products will be labeled with a chart that may be appropriate for, say, the European Union, but their chart looks different from the chart that we use here in the United States. And so an inappropriate nutrition facts chart may be a reason. Another reason could be if you are manufacturing a food that has a particular standard of identity, such as enriched pasta. You may be added to the alert because your label shows that the ingredients in that pasta, though not illegal, are not what is required to be in a product that meets that standard of identity.
Thank you again, Sarah. We'll go to another listener from Canada. Would you recommend retaining an attorney to issue the petition for removal from the import alert list? Sarah, what would you recommend in that case?
So, creating the petition to remove you from an import alert is certainly a service that we here at Registrar Corp can assist you with. You could hire an attorney, but whether that attorney has a lot of experience with FDA import alerts is questionable. We here at Registrar Corp have been working to help companies be removed from import alerts for a number of years now, and we have a lot of experience with many different types of import alerts, and we would be happy to assist you to get some of your corrective actions in place, such as things through food safety plans or label reviews, and determine how best to create that really concise and direct to the point petition that can successfully convince FDA to have you removed from that import alert.
Thanks, Sarah. We'll take a couple more questions now. If my company is already on a green list, but my company name has changed, do I need to petition again?
So this is a special case where you won't need to produce a full petition again. If the only thing that's changing is your company name, so your company is producing at the same facility, you're still producing those same products, you've just changed your name from company ABC to company XYZ, you could submit a request to change the name on the green list. So this petition, you would still need to petition FDA, but that petition would just need to include proof that the name has changed. So, for example, government documents to show the name change, as well as proof that you are still working through that same facility that you were working with when you were added to the green list originally, and then FDA will likely accept this information and allow you to change the name on the green list, but allow you to keep your green list status.
So we have a question in regards to labeling. It doesn't necessarily have to do with this presentation, but we do also assist with labeling, and labeling can be something that does get you on import alert, as my colleague mentioned. What do you do, Sarah? I know you used to work in our labeling department. If the product is very small, how do you label the nutrition facts in that case?
So there are a number of different ways to do it, depending on the exact size of the product label. If you cannot fit the standard nutrition facts chart, you can do a nutrition facts chart that's more tabular format. So instead of having one long column, it's kind of side by side to help you on a package that may be shorter. In addition, there's also options to label with a linear nutrition facts chart if your product meets specific size requirements, in which case, instead of being in chart form, it looks more like a continuous string of words which will include all of the nutrition facts information. Or if your product is very, very small, there are exemptions from nutrition facts labeling. However, it's important to note that this is based off of the size of the container. So if you have a 3-pound jar of mayonnaise, you can't put a very, very tiny label on it and then claim that the label is too small to include the nutrition facts chart, because FDA will point out the size of your actual container. So these exemptions would only apply to products coming in very small containers.
Thank you, Sarah. We'll take our second to last question now. If we are a distributor and not a manufacturer, do we as a company need an FDA registration? Thank you for this question. Registration for the FDA is only required for food facilities that manufacture, process, pack, or hold human food for consumption in the U.S. So if you are a distributor and never physically handle the food, you do not require an FDA registration. But if you do store the food, relabel, repack it at all, then yes, you do require an FDA registration. Another question here, if my company needs a HACCP plan as part of documentation, but they do not have one and need us to assist, do we need to charge separately? So Monica, I think you may be referring to, you may have contacted us for our service or at some point. A HACCP plan is a corrective action that would be a separate charge beyond our regular import alert service petition. And then we're going to take our last question from Canada. We have a product manufactured by a third-party manufacturer that got an alert. Can I petition this, or does the third-party manufacturer need to submit the petition? So, Sarah, co-packers, can a distributor or brand owner petition on behalf of a co-packer?
You can certainly submit that petition on behalf of the original manufacturer, though the original manufacturer will need to be involved in your petition process, as you'll need to show evidence of corrective actions and shipments. We, as a third party, often help many companies to complete their petitions and submit to FDA, so it is possible to work as a third party and assist, but it's really important to note that that original manufacturer is the one that's going to be implementing those corrective actions, so they will need to be very involved in the process.
Thank you, Sarah. We are out of time for today, but you can send us additional questions to the email on your screen, info@registrarcorp.com. We have 19 international offices, so we speak your language and in your time zone. Please do not hesitate to contact us either through the phone or email there, or going to our website and using our live 24/7 chat feature. We really would be pleased to get you some assistance and provide guidance to your company. This concludes our presentation. Thank you for joining us today.